Today I would like to talk about the Pyrrhic Wars. If you remember my last video from a really long time ago was the Roman conquest of Italy. I talked about how the Romans fought off the Samnites, Etruscans, Gauls in order to conquer most of Italy, but they didn't conquer the Greek cities to the south. So we're going to talk about the Pyrrhic Wars today. One of Rome's first really major wars in its history. So before we actually talk about the war, we have to talk about the political situation in Italy. And Rome had recently subdued the Samnites, the Etruscans, and pretty much all of the other Italic kingdoms and tribes in Italy. Like, as you can tell with this map, Roman expansion is really beginning at this time period. They crush the Samnites in war, take over Etruscan lands, and then start moving south against some of the other tribes. And in the meantime, there are Greek settlers who settle here. Like, you have to remember that a really long time ago, the Greeks settled throughout the Mediterranean, and we have Greek cities in the south, such as Tarentum, that are worried about the Roman expansionism in the north. So they call to a kingdom in mainland Greece called Epirus to aid them and fight the Romans back. And there's even an incident where there were Roman ships, there were like 10 of them, spotted right off the coast of Tarentum, so that just shows how Roman Roman expansionism was really worrying the people of Tarentum. So also we need to talk about the political situation in Greece, or the East at the time, because things are wild during this time. So Alexander the Great, as you all know, he conquered the Persian Empire within only around 10 years and left a massive empire at his death. But right after he died, all of his generals divided up his empire and fought the wars of the Diadochi. And many of his generals actually died in that war, actually, and their kingdoms didn't really last too long. Like, for example, Antigonus, as you see on the map, he ends up getting killed in battle. So does Lysimachus. Cassander doesn't last for long either. It's really only Seleucus and Ptolemy that get off victorious, and even Seleucus is assassinated. So after, the Diadochi or the generals or comrades of Alexander die off, their children take their thrones, and their children basically permanently divide Alexander's empire. Like, his empire is never going to really be reunited at all, not really even come close to it. And all of this fighting between all the Greek kingdoms in the east, all the Hellenistic states, means that they're unaware of other threats such as Rome that are already rising. So we have Pyrrhus of Epirus. He's actually a second cousin of Alexander the Great through his mother's bloodline, and he was the king of the Molossian tribe who took over Epirus, and he had a lot of military experience. Like, if you look at Pyrrhus's life, it's pretty much all just conflict and war. He fought in the wars of the Diadochi because the Macedonian king Cassander threatened his holdings, so he allied with the king Antigonus, and he fought with distinction at the Battle of Ipsus, but unfortunately he fought on the losing side, so he didn't really get anything out of that. And when he heard that the Greek city-states of Italy, in southern Italy, were asking him for military aid, he saw an opportunity to make some conquests in the west, just like Alexander conquered the east. So then he immediately responded and agreed to come to aid against the Romans. So we need to talk about Pyrrhus's army. So Pyrrhus's army is pretty much just the typical Macedonian phalanx style army with, companion cavalry. But then he also had mercenary elephants as well, which was going to be a major factor in this war. And he also had mercenaries from like the rebellious Italian tribes or from the Greek city-states that were helping him. And the Romans, on the other hand, they fought with hastati, principae, and triarii, just the classical Roman infantry of the early Republic. And they had a limited amount of cavalry, but cavalry wasn't really big in ancient Rome at this time yet. And they were led by, of course, consuls. So here I have the battles of Heraclea and Asculum. So a Roman army of 50,000, led by a Roman consul, Publius Lavinius, met with Pyrrhus at Heraclea, and Pyrrhus actually won the battle because his elephants were able to pull through and defeat the Romans. The Romans have never faced elephants or even seen elephants before this battle. So the Romans, of course, end up losing to Pyrrhus, but Pyrrhus loses 13,000 men fighting the Romans. And when the Romans arrive with another force at Asculum, around 40,000, Pyrrhus manages to beat them again, because Pyrrhus is actually a really good tactician, but Pyrrhus loses 3,000 men. And Pyrrhus's victories against the Romans are depleting him of his manpower, and you gotta know Epirus, it's a small kingdom in Italy, in Greece. So he already has low manpower to begin with, and his allies don't really provide him with much manpower either. Whereas the Romans, they can just raise a whole new army. And Pyrrhus's costly victories are known as Pyrrhic victories. It's when you win a battle and you end up losing so many of your men that it's not really an ideal victory. Like if you've played Total War before, you would understand, but that's just what the term is. So then we have the Battle of Beneventum, because after Pyrrhus's costly victories, he goes into Sicily and he campaigns against Carthage on behalf of the Greek city-states there trying to rebel against Carthage. Carthage, it's a Phoenician city-state that created an empire in Africa, and they're trying to bring dominance into the Italian mainland at the same time as the Romans, which is going to lead to some conflict later. While he was away, though, the Romans end up defeating his allies at the Battle of the Cranita Hills, and this forces Pyrrhus to abandon his campaign in Sicily and return back to fight the Romans. And at the Battle of Beneventum, the Romans under Manius Curius Dentatus have around 17,000, while Pyrrhus has 20,000, and including elephants, of course. But the Romans have adapted to Pyrrhus's tactics of using elephants by now, and they've implemented the javelin in their army in order to use it as a way to kill the elephants. And Pyrrhus ends up losing 11,000 men in this battle. The Romans, they still lose 9,000 men, but Pyrrhus lost so many men that he's forced to withdraw his campaign. So this is basically a strategic victory for Rome, and the war ends in pretty much a Roman victory because Pyrrhus doesn't get anything out of the war but losses, whereas the Romans are able to actually become the dominant power in Italy after forcing Pyrrhus to retreat. So the aftermath, Rome's, of course, now the dominant power in Italy, and after Pyrrhus left, they just swiftly conquered the Greek cities in the south, and Carthage, on the other hand, takes control of most of Sicily. Now, Pyrrhus' story isn't over, though, because he would go back to Epirus, become the king of Epirus, and then seek a war against the Greeks in the mainland, the rival Greek powers in the mainland, and he fights a battle in Argos, and while he's on the ground fighting, because his army is actually trapped in Argos at the time, he's fighting this one soldier, and then that soldier's mother, from a rooftop, throws a brick down on Pyrrhus's head, and Pyrrhus ends up getting wounded, and that allows the enemies to kill him, behead him, and that's the end of the story of Pyrrhus of Epirus. And supposedly, when Pyrrhus left Italy, the Romans and the Carthaginians are now going to compete for whatever's left. So Pyrrhus supposedly stated, "What a battlefield! I am leaving for Carthage and Rome," which is something that's going to be of relevance in the next episode, where Rome fights Carthage in several bloody wars that would determine the fate of the Mediterranean forever.